Girls Mean Trouble. Chapter 7. Piggy in the Middle. It didn't take Einstein to work out that Mum had told Rory to get off my case. Ever since the red tomato competition, whenever Mum was around, he acted like he was going for best behaved boy of the year, but the moment we were on our own, he pretended to be playing romantic violin music, giving it the full smoochy sound effects, or otherwise he made some clever little remark like, "Oh, where's your girlfriend, Ollie? Better find her quick, in case she's missing you." "Don't be stupid, Rory, she's practically my sister," I'd snap back at him. Because of my pathetic little brother, everything had gone wrong. Before he'd started interfering, Frankie and I had been getting on really well together. Now she was all distant and unfriendly. It was unbearable. On the afternoon of the tragic tournament, we went for miles in the car. Twice we stopped to explore little coastal villages. The pavements were always too narrow for more than two people to walk side by side. I happened to be next to Charlie for quite a while. She did that thing of not stepping on the cracks between the paving stones, but they were a bit too close together, so she had to take stupid little mincing steps. She pretended to be a posh girl, wiggling her hips, and I couldn't help laughing. But then I felt suddenly sad. I wished it was Frankie and me laughing. The following day I woke up and remembered that this was the day we were going to meet Sam. It was going to be so weird, having Sam around at the same time as Frankie. I wasn't sure that I was looking forward to it. Normally, I'd be really pleased about the thought of having a laugh with my best mate, but everything was different now. I just wanted to be with Frankie and no one else. We were due to meet Sam and his mum outside Marks and Spencer's in Brinton at 12:30 and then eat dinner with them, somewhere like McDonald's, hopefully. We were a bit late, so I guess I'd get there first. I guessed right. We all spotted Mrs. Cotterill from miles away. She was wearing a bright pink jacket on top of a pair of black, shiny trousers with enormous flares. On her head was a great big, floppy straw hat, and perched on her nose a pair of very little round sunglasses. When you got nearer, you could see that her shirt was white with pink spots on it, and the top bit turned into a sort of floaty scarf. Then when you got even nearer, you could see little stiletto heels poking out from the bottom of the trousers. What did she think she looked like? I didn't know how Sam could bear to be seen with her. I'd have to stand a few metres behind Mum if she ever dressed like that. "Cooey!" she called, waving both arms in the air as though she was flagging in a Boeing 747. I noticed poor old Sam trying to grab one of her arms to stop her, but she just shook him off and kept waving. "Good old Pammy," said Mum. "What have I let myself in for?" muttered Peter. Rory giggled and turned to Charlie and Frankie. "Told you Sam was weird, didn't I?" "Well, you know where he gets it from." Frankie laughed loudly. She wasn't so quick to defend weird people this time, I noticed. "Hi, Sam. Hello, Mrs. Cotterill," I said. "Ollie, you must call me Pammy. Are you having a lovely holiday?" "We are, although I've left my sister Letitia and my niece at home. Poor Daisy isn't feeling 100% today. Still, never mind, I expect you'll meet her another day." Sam rolled his eyes at me as Mum and the others arrived. Sam's mum was staring at Frankie and Charlie with this really silly smile on her face, even though she was talking to Mum. "Hello, Sue, you're looking tanned. Not good for you, you know. It'll ruin your skin. Not to mention the health hazard. But it does suit you, my dear, I must confess. And who are these two lovely young ladies?" "This is Frankie and this is Charlie," said Mum, but Mrs. Cotterill was nodding and waiting for more. "Peter's daughters," Mum explained. Frankie and Charlie smiled dutifully. "Hello, my dears." "You've met Peter before, haven't you, Pammy?" said Mum. "Oh, yes, said Mrs. C, wafting her hand about as though she was trying to get rid of Mum's silly remark. "We met at the school fete, didn't we, Peter? I was the one serving the squash, remember?" Peter smiled and mumbled something. "Come on then," she said as she swung round, narrowly missing Rory's head with her handbag. "Pity." Then she went striding through the crowded street like a big pink plough, while we all followed meekly. I found us the most super little restaurant, within walking distance, and booked a table. She stopped without warning to look at her watch, and Muggins went into the back of her. I could hear Sam sniggering and the others trying to hide their giggles. Great start. Mrs. Cotterill didn't appear to notice, and I must admit her back felt very spongy. Perhaps she wore body protection. 12:35, perfect timing. Then off she went again, left, right. The restaurant was really posh. "Mum always chooses places like this," said Sam in a whisper to me. It was amazing that he didn't care. If it had been my mum, I would have been dead embarrassed if we went anywhere that looked much different from McDonald's. I saw Mum give Peter a worried look. I knew why. She was feeling anxious that it might be too expensive. She opened her mouth to say something, then shut it again and shrugged as Mrs. Cotterill marched up to a waiter and told him she'd booked a table for 12:45. Our table was right in the middle of the whole restaurant. We were on the point of sitting down when the foghorn started laying down the law. Come on, you two. You're not going to leave those beautiful young ladies with no young men to sit next to, are you? Let Frankie pop in next to you, Sam. Sam looked as though the thought of sitting next to Frankie was the scariest thing ever. He wasn't used to girls any more than I was, and I knew he'd hate having to sit next to her. I was praying that Mrs. C would suggest that I should sit next to her instead, but I was out of luck. I'm fine, honestly, said Frankie. Nonsense! Move up one, Sam. Sam stayed glued to me, but shoved me along one so Frankie could sit in the seat between him and Peter. Mrs. Cotterill was smiling and patting the chair next to her. You come and sit next to me, Sue. I want to hear what you've been getting up to. Mum was staring at the pepper like she was willing it to give her a bit of help. She needn't have bothered. Sam's mum was beaming around at all of us. Lovely, she said, taking her jacket off. Just how it should be. Boy, girl. Apart from those two naughty boys sitting together over there. That's because of those two naughty girls sitting together over there, said Charlie, pointing to Mrs. Cotterill and Mum. Peter closed his eyes as though he couldn't bear to see what was going to happen after his daughter's cheeky remark. Mrs. Cotterill's eyes bulged. I don't suppose anyone had ever dared to speak to her like that before. We all held our breath, and after a couple of seconds she suddenly let out a great guffaw of laughter and wagged her finger at Charlie. I can see you're going to be a terror, she exclaimed, which made Rory break into uncontrollable giggles. But the moment passed quickly. Mrs. C held her pink jacket aloft. Waiter? In about 2 seconds a waiter appeared and took the jacket. You can always tell how good a restaurant is by the attitude of the waiters, you know, she whispered to Peter. She had swapped her sunglasses for a pair of half-glasses hanging on a sparkling string. She looked over the top of them at Mum. This meal is on me, my dear. Mum started to protest, but Mrs. Cotterill flapped Mum's words away. No, I'm having none of it. I want to treat you all because I have a favour to ask. I saw Mum gulp. There's an absolutely super concert on tomorrow afternoon at the Dominion, and my sister's next-door neighbour's brother-in-law is the conductor, which is so exciting. Of course, the youngsters would frankly be bored to tears, so we were wondering whether you and Peter might be so kind as to have Sam and Daisy for us. Yes, of course we will, Mum said immediately. She looked quite relieved. She must have been imagining a much bigger favour. Jolly good, that's settled then. Daisy will be fine tomorrow. She's had a touch of sickness and diarrhoea, but nothing to worry about. What's Daisy like? Frankie asked Sam. She's all right, Sam muttered. Then he buried his head in the menu. Yeah, but what's she like? Frankie persisted. She's got short hair, said Sam. This time he practically turned his back on Frankie. He was so embarrassed about talking to a girl. It's quite funny, really. How old is she and what kind of things does she like doing? Frankie leaned forwards and a big strand of her hair fell over Sam's shoulders. I saw him look at it out of the corner of his eye and then try to pull his shoulder away subtly. 13, hockey, was all he managed. On the other side of me, Charlie and Rory were giggling together about something. Probably Sam. And what about you? Frankie said to Sam, touching his arm for a second to try and get him to face her a bit more, but it just made him jump. Just then Peter chipped in. What should we do tomorrow then, you lot? Got any ideas, Sam? Sam looked at Peter as though he'd just saved him from a man-eating alligator. 10-pin bowling? He piped up. Yeah, that would be great. 10-pin bowling, said Peter. You any good at it, Sam? He's a super little bowler, said Mrs. Cotterill, which made Charlie's menu shake up and down in front of her face, but Mrs. C didn't even notice. Right, bowling it is, said Peter. We'll have boys against girls. And we'll slaughter them, won't we, girls? Said Mum. Yeah, said Charlie, showing a pink face and watering eyes. I was right. She'd been having hysterics behind her menu. Whereabouts in Brinton are you staying, Sam? Frankie went on, tossing her head so her hair went back over her shoulder. And I suddenly got that same feeling that I'd had when those two boys had looked at her on the beach. I knew it was stupid because it was only Sam, but I couldn't help feeling jealous. Frankie was being so friendly with him, and I knew he'd start to get used to it after a bit. Then if it was anyone's guess what might happen. If Frankie carried on draping her hair all over him, he might get the idea she fancied him. The very thought of that made my blood boil. I wish we could get this stupid meal over with and go home. Then I remembered about having to see him the next day. The whole thing was turning into a nightmare. If only Frankie would stop giving Sam so much attention. It was like she was doing it on purpose. That's a very fierce scowl, Oliver. Mrs. Cotterill suddenly broke off what she was saying to Mum to tell me. I was already pretty mad, but that did it. It's bad enough having all these mixed-up feelings about Frankie, but I didn't want the whole world checking every single expression I ever wore. Good old Peter said something about Rory and Charlie's sandcastles then, and it got Mrs. Cotterill off my case. But I could see Sam getting more and more mesmerised by Frankie's hair. Pity she hadn't got it up in one of those big scrunchy things. He finally stopped gulping and answered her question. At my Aunt Letitia's. She's divorced, you see. He made it sound a really terrible thing to be. Frankie was nodding sympathetically as though he'd just said she was terminally ill or something. Sam did have a dad, but he wasn't around much because he'd worked abroad. Loads of people are divorced these days, I informed Sam. So whereabouts does Aunt Letitia live? Frankie carried on, ignoring me. She and Sam were acting like I wasn't there. Maybe I died without realising it and turned into a ghost. She's got a flat in Duke Street, number 4. She lives on the 2nd floor. You have to take the lift. He'd be giving her his phone number next, the plonker. After that, things went downhill all the way. All that I'd imagined started coming true. Frankie talked more and more to Sam until he wasn't nervous of her at all. He was looking right into her eyes and cracking all sorts of clever jokes while she giggled and looked at him from under her straight eyelashes. I nearly threw up. To make matters worse, while those two were talking like mad on one side of me, Charlie and Rory were giggling like mad on the other side. I felt like poor sad Piggy in the middle. Mrs. Cotterill kept on trying to draw me into the adults' conversation, which stopped me from being able to hear what Frankie and Sam were saying to each other, and that made me more jealous than ever. I don't know why I thought Sam was my best mate. He's certainly not anymore. Chapter 8. Scheming. It came as a big relief when Mrs. Cotterill looked at her watch and said, "Oh my goodness, 3:30. How time flies when you're enjoying yourself." She paid the bill and we all thanked her very much. "Oh, no, 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 no. It's I who must thank you for looking after the young folk tomorrow. Waiter?" We followed her out of the restaurant and stood in a queue waiting to be kissed on both cheeks. There was no way out of it. She'd done it to Mum, Peter and Frankie so far. Talk about embarrassing. When it got to my turn, I braced myself and turned my head really far to the side so her lips wouldn't reach properly. My technique worked. I was the only one who didn't have to rub the greasy pink mark off my face when she'd gone. "Bye, Frankie," said Sam in a gooey voice. "See you tomorrow, Sam," Frankie replied, tipping her head on one side and flashing him one of her really nice smiles. Sam looked as though the angel Gabriel had appeared and pronounced him the chosen one. It was amazing that one girl could have this effect. Not only had she got Sam and me thinking she was the greatest thing on God's earth, she got me hating my friend's guts too. Maybe that's what girl power means. "Bye, Sam," I said loudly to bring him back to earth, but his eyes were glued to Frankie. "Yeah, see you, Ollie." "Not if I can help it." From that moment on, I was determined that somehow or other I was going to make sure that tomorrow afternoon never happened. I just couldn't stomach spending another second with Sam and Frankie hitting it off so brilliantly, while I felt like a spare part. I spent the rest of the afternoon scheming. By the time we got back home, I reckoned I'd come up with something that with a bit of luck would work a treat. I was going to pretend to be ill. Next I had to decide on the illness. I didn't want to get everyone so worried that they started calling doctors or ambulances or anything like that, because I reckoned medical people would click there was nothing wrong with me pretty quickly. On the other hand, I needed to be ill enough for Mum and Peter to be pretty anxious and feel sorry for me. The good thing about this idea was that Frankie would be sorry for me too. So sorry that she'd forget all about my ex-friend, Sam Cotterill. Right, what was the illness to be? Food poisoning was probably the best idea because I could blame it on the meal we'd had in that posh restaurant. Except I wasn't sure when the poisoning would have started. Maybe I should wait till just after the pizza and chips that Mum was about to pull out of the freezer. No, that wouldn't work. With 2 large pizzas between 6 of us, the others would be poisoned as well. I racked my brains to think of a solution, and it was Charlie who gave me my next bit of inspiration. "I'm really full, Sue. I don't think I can manage pizza and chips after that big lunch and the ice cream in the park." "Yeah, I'm full too, Mum," I said. "Why don't we just have sandwiches in front of the telly? I don't mind making them." Mum beamed at me. 10 out of 10, Ollie. "Good idea, Ollie. Go for it." She frowned. "Wait a minute. What have we got to put in the sandwiches?" "We've got eggs and cheese and jam, haven't we?" I pointed out helpfully. "I'll just make a selection," I offered. "How long are you supposed to boil the eggs for?" "Turn the heat down when the water's boiled and leave them in for about 10 minutes to be sure. Then put them in cold water to cool down before you shell them." As I went through to the kitchen, I felt like singing, because Frankie had almost smiled at me. At this rate, I wouldn't need to be ill. I just keep impressing her with my helpful boy of the century act. My plan was to hard-boil 2 eggs, so there wouldn't be many egg sandwiches. I do a lot more cheese and jam ones, but only eat the egg ones myself. That way, it would be perfectly possible that one of the eggs was rotten and that by coincidence, I just happened to be the only one to eat sandwiches made from that egg. Brilliant. And utterly foolproof. I did start singing then. I felt so good. "There you go," I said a bit later, as I put the big silver platter down on the coffee table. They were all engrossed in the television, but Mum gave me a nice smile and mouthed, "Well done." I was hoping that Frankie might give me a nice smile too, but she just looked irritated because I was blocking the screen from her view. Talk about gratitude. I quickly took 3 egg sandwiches and put them on my plate. Then I thought I ought to draw attention to what I was eating, so that when I started writhing around with stomach cramps in about 20 minutes, everyone would instantly make the connection. Don't nick all the egg ones, said Rory, who'd been the only one paying more attention to the sandwiches than to the telly. The perfect opening. Cheers, Rory. Anyone want some tea? I asked when all the sandwiches had gone. Yes, please, said Mum with another big beam. Peter winked at me and Charlie pretended to faint. No, thanks, said Frankie, but I'll help you make it if you want. It was like a nature reserve inside my stomach. There were so many butterflies belting about. Thanks. She followed me into the kitchen and we started getting all the tea things out, neither of us speaking. I wished I could get inside her head and find out whether she was thinking about Sam or me or what. That was a perfect situation to start acting ill, but I felt nervous all of a sudden. I didn't like the idea of deceiving Frankie. Still, it was all in a good cause. Ah! What? I gripped the sink with both hands and lowered my head. Are you all right? Yeah, I'll be okay. Felt like stomach cramp. Ah! I made that second cry a bit more dramatic, but I didn't clutch my stomach or anything. I wanted to bring it on gradually. Are you all right in there? Called Mum from the other room. Ollie's got stomach cramp, Frankie called back. No one came rushing to my aid, I noticed. It's great having such a loyal fan club. I poured the boiling water onto the tea and deliberately made my hand shake as I was doing it. Out of the corner of my eye, I could see the worried look on Frankie's face. You'd better sit down, Ollie. I'll finish off the tea. I went through to the other room, then staggered past Mum, murmuring that I was going to the toilet. She didn't say anything, but looked pretty concerned. So far, so good. While I was in the bathroom, I ran the hot water and hung my face over the rising steam with a towel over my head for ages. When I looked in the mirror, it looked just right. I'd got a sort of sweaty red glow. I belted downstairs really quickly before it went, then slowed right down for my grand entrance into the living room. It still wasn't quite time to start clutching my stomach, but I thought a bit of reeling around on my way to the settee would be good. I was nearly sick, I told Mum weakly as I flopped back onto the settee. That got her attention. She sat up quickly and examined my face carefully. My God, you're sweating, Ollie. You look terrible, Charlie added, screwing up her face into a disgusted expression. Have you still got stomach cramps? Asked Frankie. I nodded and closed my eyes as though the pain was too much to bear. Rory wasn't saying anything, I noticed, which either meant that he was so worried about his dearly beloved brother, or that he'd been rendered speechless, or he wasn't convinced by my act, and he was watching me like a hawk, ready to bust my cover at the first opportunity. Still, so far, so good. Chapter 9. Sick. I hadn't felt such power since I'd broken my arm in the school playground and all the teachers had gathered round me and spoken in gentle, caring tones. I had to be careful, though. If I got sussed, I'd have to suffer watching Sam and Frankie hitting it off like Prince Charming and Cinderella, and get a load of grief from Mum. Mum kept on reaching out to feel how hot I was. That's better, she said after a while. You don't seem to have such a temperature now. I was quite worried there for a while. And that got me worried. I didn't want to overdo it and pretend to be sick too often or I'd get sussed. But on the other hand, I had to appear to be ill enough to cock up the arrangements for the next day. I reckoned another trip to the bathroom was about due. I feel sick again, I said, making a dive for the door and rushing upstairs. I ran another basin full of really hot water and went through the towel routine again to get that sweaty look back, and then I was ready. Have you been sick? Asked Mum sympathetically when I reappeared. I wasn't sure if Mum would take one sniff and know straight away that I was lying, so I had to be careful. A bit, I answered in a whisper as I sunk dramatically into the settee. You'd better try and drink a bit of water, said Mum. You must be quite dehydrated. I sipped at the water but kept my eyes shut as though I was exhausted. Actually, I was exhausted. It wasn't easy keeping the act up with so many people watching me. Rory looked as though he wasn't quite convinced for a start, but I knew how my little brother's mind worked. He'd be thinking that he'd better not accuse me of faking it just in case he was wrong, and everyone would hate him for being so hard on me. I was also knackered because of trying to keep an eye on Frankie without anyone noticing. The last thing I wanted was to make her go off me even more, but it's not easy to look burning hot and super cool at the same time. I kept my eyes closed because I had the horrible feeling Rory was trying to catch me out. I wished he'd just go to bed or something. What are we going to do if Ollie's still not well tomorrow? Charlie asked the $6 million question. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it, Mum replied. I think you should go to bed now, love, she said to me, stroking my hair off my face. I felt pretty smug as I lay in bed, staring into the darkness. Just had to show no signs of improvement in the morning, and hopefully the whole trip would be called off. I could hear them all killing themselves laughing at something on the telly, and I wished I was down there too, but I reckoned it was worth giving up one evening to make sure I didn't have to suffer the company of Romeo and Juliet the next day. I was suddenly aware of whispering and tiptoeing around me. I listened for a while with my eyes closed, while the memory of the previous evening slowly came back to me. We'd finally arrived at that awful day. I gave a little moan and turned over. "How do you feel?" asked Mum, sitting on my bed and stroking my forehead. "I don't think you've got a temperature, so that's a good start." "My head aches," I whispered, "and so does my stomach." I half opened my eyes and saw that Rory and Charlie were hovering in the doorway waiting for the verdict. "Do you want to get up and see how you feel, love?" "I'll try," I said, wishing that Rory and Charlie would go away. It was so much easier fooling Mum on her own. "I'll be downstairs. Just call out if you want me." She shooed Rory and Charlie away as she went out, but I made sure I got out of bed very slowly and with a pained expression on my face, just in case antennae features was peeping through the crack in the door. When I went to the bathroom, I could hear that they were all talking in hushed voices downstairs, but I couldn't make out what they were saying. I looked in the mirror and thought I looked far too healthy and normal. I went back to bed and got down under the covers so that only the top half of my face was showing. Then I called out to Mum in a really pathetic voice. She came running up straight away and sat down on the bed. "I tried getting up, Mum, but I haven't got any energy. I think it's because I was sick once more in the night. I'll be okay by tomorrow, but I'd better stay in bed today." "Okay, love. You know how you feel. I'll stay with you." "What do you mean?" "Don't worry about me, Ollie. I wasn't all that bothered about going bowling anyway. The others can go on their own. I'll have some time to myself for quiet reading. I'm looking forward to it, honestly." She was nodding and smiling brightly to reassure me that she really didn't mind having to drop out of the great outing to the Brinton Bowlplex. And I was lying there, my brain in overdrive, trying to think how I could rewind the morning and wake up again miraculously cured. I wanted to kick myself for being such a dir. I should have realised they'd all just go bowling anyway, shouldn't I? I couldn't bear the thought of Sam and Frankie there without me. Her eyelashes would be batting so much she'd probably get eye-ache. As for Sam, he'd just act like a complete idiot. I had to do something, and quick. "I might feel better by this afternoon. We're not meeting them till then, are we?" "No, but Peter thought it would be nice to have a look round the town beforehand and maybe get a McDonald's at lunchtime." What was she trying to do? Torture me? "I'm just going to the loo, Mum." I got out of bed slowly and went off to the bathroom. Then I cleaned my teeth and washed my face. By the time I got to back to my room, Mum was downstairs. I got dressed and went down too. "I feel miles better now I've had a wash," I said, smiling round at everyone. "That's good," said Peter. "By tomorrow you'll be completely cured, I should think. Just take it easy today. Your body must be quite weakened with all that vomiting." "Well, it was only twice, and the second time there was hardly anything." "Lovely, Ollie," said Rory, who was in the middle of the sitting room eating a piece of toast and kicking a ball of screwed-up newspaper around the room. "Why don't you give me all the gory details so I can really enjoy this toast?" I ignored him. "It's amazing. The weakness seems to have gone now," I said as I went through to the kitchen. "Is there any toast left, Mum?" "Are you sure you feel like eating, Ollie?" "Yeah, I'm starving," I grinned. "You are feeling better," she turned to Peter. "I think as long as he takes it easy, he'll be all right to come along, don't you?" "If Ollie thinks he can cope, I'm sure he can." Phew. Bye. See you next time.